They laughed when I fell, my own grandchildren, laughing as my knees hit the cold marble floor. My palm burned from the impact, my pride shattered harder than the china cup that slipped from my hand. "Careful, Grandma," Emma snickered, not moving to help. "Maybe you should use a walker next time." The sound of their laughter still echoes in my head, sharper than glass. I remember looking up at their beautiful young faces, faces I once kissed goodnight, now twisted with cruel amusement. That was the moment something inside me went quiet, not broken, just silent. You never expect cruelty from your own blood. You think the world might turn its back on you, but never the family you raised, fed, and prayed for. Yet there I was, on the polished floor of my son's new mansion, a mansion I'd helped him buy, watching my grandchildren scroll through their phones, smiling at each other as if my pain was a viral joke. "Don't make a big deal," my son Michael said later. He was stirring his coffee, not meeting my eyes. "They're kids, Mom. You're too sensitive." Too sensitive. The same son I once walked to school in the rain so he wouldn't catch cold. The same boy I defended when teachers said he wouldn't amount to much. Now he defended his children's mockery instead of his mother's dignity. After that, I stopped correcting them, stopped reminding them to say thank you, to take off their shoes before walking across the rug I'd saved up to buy. I stopped trying to be heard, because sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon you can carry. I moved quietly around the house like a shadow, folding their laundry, washing dishes they left in the sink, cooking meals no one complimented. They called me Grandma Joe, like it was a title of pity, not love. "Grandma, the TV's too loud." "Grandma, stop humming." "Grandma, you left crumbs on the counter." Every word chipped away at me. Then came the day of the accident, or what they like to call Grandma's dramatic moment. It was a Sunday afternoon. I'd baked an apple pie, the way my late husband, John, used to love. The scent filled the kitchen, warm and sweet. I carried it out to the dining table, my hands trembling slightly from arthritis. The twins, Emma and Tyler Fowies, were arguing about who got the bigger piece. They were always arguing, always loud. I tried to mediate. "You can share," I started, but the next moment, the rug corner caught my foot. I remember the flash of pain, the hot, dizzy panic as I fell, the sound of porcelain shattering, apple pie splattering like blood across the floor. I remember Tyler shouting, "Oh my God, Grandma's down," before he started laughing. Even as I cried out from the pain shooting through my wrist, they filmed me on their phones. I could hear the little beeps of their cameras. The humiliation burned worse than the bruise. Later that night, Michael called it an overreaction. "You didn't break anything, Mom. Don't guilt trip them," he said. His wife, Patricia, stood behind him, arms folded. "You can't expect them to baby you," she added. "They're teenagers." I looked at her, the woman I'd once welcomed into our family with open arms, and wondered when compassion became a luxury. That night, alone in the small guest room they'd given me, I stared at the old photo on my nightstand. My husband, John, smiling in his Navy uniform, his arm around me, our young faces glowing with hope. "You wouldn't believe what they've become, John," I whispered. "You'd think I raised strangers." That was when the idea came, not out of anger, but out of clarity. I'd spent years thinking love meant endurance, that forgiveness meant silence. But what if forgiveness, real forgiveness, meant showing people what they'd lost? What if love meant stepping away and letting their own cruelty be their punishment? The next morning, I made oatmeal, set the table as usual, and smiled at the family that barely looked at me. "You're quiet today, Grandma," Emma said between bites. "Feeling okay?" "I'm fine, dear," I replied softly. Just thinking. By the end of the week, I had moved every document, the house deed, the insurance policies, the savings account records, into a neat folder. The house, though Michael liked to call it his, was legally half mine. the result of a shared investment made years ago when he begged for help with his first business loan. "Just until I get on my feet, Mom," he'd said back then. "I'll pay you back." He never did. I found the letter I'd written years ago, one I never sent, naming my legal successor in case of death. I read it again that night and smiled. The ink had faded, but my signature was clear, bold. I realized how much power I still had. Not power in anger, not in revenge, but in truth. So I waited, quietly, patiently. Because the day would come when they'd need me, when they'd turn around and find I wasn't standing behind them anymore. And when that day came, they'd finally understand what it means to lose something that truly loved them. It started sooner than I expected. A week later, Michael came home with papers in his hands and that forced smile that always meant trouble. "Mom," he began, "we've been thinking, maybe it's better if you move somewhere more comfortable. A senior place. They've got activities and nurses and—" "Are you kicking me out, Michael?" I asked calmly. His face tightened. "Don't make it sound like that. It's just, you'd have more support there. And you'd have your house to yourselves," I finished for him. Patricia crossed her arms. "It's not about that. We just think it's time you had your own space." I nodded, pretending to think it over. "All right," I said finally, "if that's what you want." Michael blinked. "Really? You're not angry?" "No," I said, smiling faintly. "I'm tired. Maybe a little rest will do me good." They looked relieved, almost happy, as if they'd just solved an inconvenience. They didn't notice the quiet way I folded my hands under the table, my heart steady for the first time in months, because I knew something they didn't. The house they were living in, the home they thought was theirs, wasn't theirs to keep. And when the time came, when they'd sit around this same table laughing again, they'd look up and find the walls weren't theirs anymore. I'd already made the first call to my lawyer, and I'd chosen the perfect day for it all to unfold. The one day they'd never see it coming. Christmas. Christmas morning smelled like cinnamon and lies. I woke up before everyone else, as I always did, out of habit more than excitement. Old women don't sleep well when their hearts are heavy. The house was quiet except for the hum of the heating vents and the soft tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. It was the same clock my late husband John had built with his own hands 50 years ago. Every sound it made reminded me of him and of everything that used to matter in this house before money, pride, and comfort replaced love. I put on my robe and went to the kitchen. The lights were off, but the Christmas tree glowed faintly through the living room doorway, reflecting in the window like a ghost. I brewed coffee and stood there, inhaling the scent, remembering all the Christmas mornings that had begun with laughter and hugs. Now it was just the quiet, the kind that presses against your ribs. I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that. Today wasn't for tears. It was for endings, and beginnings, too. At exactly 8 a.m., I set the table for breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, a pot of coffee, a tradition I'd kept for decades, though no one cared anymore. I heard footsteps upstairs, then Patricia's voice, sharp as frost. "Kids, hurry up, Grandma's probably made one of her special breakfasts again." "Ugh, oatmeal?" Emma groaned. I smiled to myself. Let them mock. This morning, they'd feast on something more bitter than oatmeal. Truth. When they finally came downstairs, the room filled with noise. Paper rustling, kids complaining, Michael yawning as he reached for coffee I'd already poured. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said automatically, not looking at me. "Merry Christmas, Michael," I replied. "Did you sleep well?" "Barely," Patricia said, sitting down. "Tyler wouldn't stop playing that stupid game till midnight. Honestly, I don't know where he gets the energy." "From being young," I said softly. "It's something you forget until it's gone." Patricia gave me that strained smile she reserved for things she didn't understand. "You know, Mom, I was thinking, after breakfast, maybe we could start packing some of your things. That way you'll be ready when the moving company comes next week." Michael shifted awkwardly. Patty. No, it's fine, I interrupted, smiling sweetly. You're right. No sense wasting time. But before that, I have something for you all. That got their attention. Even the twins looked up from their phones. For us? Tyler asked. Yes. For you. I reached under my chair and took out a small box, wrapped in silver paper. I placed it in the middle of the table. This is my Christmas gift to the family. A surprise. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You didn't have to get us anything, Mom. Oh, I know, I said, but I wanted to. Please open it. Michael peeled the paper carefully, as though politeness might change the outcome. Inside was a single white envelope. He opened it and frowned. What's this? Read it, I said. He did. The color drained from his face. Mom? What is this supposed to mean? It means exactly what it says, I replied calmly. As of yesterday, this house belongs to the new owners. The sale was finalized at noon. You have until the end of the week to vacate. Patricia's fork clattered onto her plate. You sold the house? Yes. But this is our home, she stammered. No, I corrected gently. It's my home. Or rather, it was. I've simply decided to put it into better hands. Emma burst out laughing. This is a joke, right? You can't just sell our house. I can, I said. And I did. You see, my name was still on the deed. I checked before signing the papers. Michael stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Mom, why would you do this? I looked around the table. The faces that once held love now showed only disbelief and anger. Because this house was built with love and respect, I said quietly, and both have been missing here for a long time. Patricia stood up, her voice rising. This is insane. Who would even buy this place during the holidays? I smiled. A very nice couple from Oregon. They fell in love with the view, paid in cash. Michael's face twisted. You can't do this without telling me. I've been paying the property taxes with money from my account, I interrupted. Remember that investment I made for you years ago? The one you handled for me? I checked the statements. Every cent came from there. You haven't paid a thing. Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. You tricked us, she whispered. No, I said. I trusted you. You tricked me. I just decided to stop pretending I didn't notice. For a moment, the room was silent except for the ticking of John's old clock. Tick, tick, tick. Michael finally spoke. So what now? Where are you going to live, Mom? Some retirement home? I've already made arrangements, I said. There's a small cottage by the lake. Peaceful, quiet. Paid in full with the money from this sale. I'll have everything I need. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. And what about us? We have nowhere to go. I met her eyes. Then you'll have to do what I did when I was your age. Start over. The twins looked between us, wide-eyed, not fully understanding, but sensing the tension. Michael ran a hand through his hair. This isn't right, Mom. You can't just... Can I? I said softly. You've all told me what I can and can't do for years. What to cook, where to sit, how loud to breathe. But I'm still the woman who built this family from nothing. I taught you to work hard, to love, to stand on your own feet. You just forgot who taught you. Patricia looked like she might cry. How could you do this on Christmas? Because Christmas is when people remember what matters, I said. And you needed to remember. Michael looked at me for a long time, his eyes hard but wet at the corners. I can't believe you'd humiliate us like this. No, son, I whispered. I didn't humiliate you. You did that yourselves when you stopped respecting your mother. He said nothing after that. No one did. The room felt heavy, like the air itself had turned to stone. I stood up, my old bones creaking, and placed my hand on the back of the chair one last time. I'll be leaving tomorrow morning, I said quietly. The movers will handle the rest. The new owners are coming to sign the final inspection papers on Friday. Please make sure the house is clean. Patricia covered her mouth in shock. Emma muttered something under her breath that sounded like psycho. Tyler stared at his phone, pretending not to care, but I saw his hands shaking. I turned toward the hallway. My suitcase was already packed. Everything I cared about fit into one small bag. Photos, my wedding ring, a few letters, John's watch. The rest I was leaving behind. When I reached the front door, Michael called after me. "Mom, wait." I paused but didn't turn. He stepped closer. "Is this really what you want?" "No," I said softly, "but it's what's necessary." And then I walked out. The cold air bit my cheeks, but it felt clean, honest. I closed the door behind me and felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. As I stepped onto the snowy sidewalk, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my lawyer. Funds transferred. Sale complete. Merry Christmas, Mrs. Josephine Clark. Merry Christmas indeed, because for the first time in years, I felt free. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't know, was that this was only the beginning. By New Year's, the truth about my family's secrets would explode, and the world would see just how rotten the roots of our beautiful family tree really were. You never realize how heavy silence can be until it fills a house that once echoed with laughter. That was the sound that met me when I returned a week later. Silence. No barking dog, no chatter from the television, no Emma's music pulsing through the walls, just emptiness. I had come to collect a few last things before the buyers moved in. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, not from guilt, but from something sadder and deeper. Nostalgia. The living room looked smaller than I remembered. The walls were bare where family photos had hung for years. Patricia's expensive vases were gone, and the corner where my rocking chair used to sit was empty. My footprints trailed in the thin film of dust that had already settled on the floor. I wandered through the house slowly, like a ghost retracing her own life. The faint smell of my apple pie still lingered in the kitchen. Or maybe I just imagined it. That kitchen had seen everything: birthdays, arguments, Christmas mornings, and one too many cold dinners eaten alone. When I reached the counter, I found a note. My son's handwriting, uneven, rushed. "Mom, we're staying at a hotel until we figure things out. I know you think you did what's right, but you've left us with nothing. I'll never forgive you for this. Nothing." The word echoed in my mind like a slap. I sat down on the stool and read it again, slower this time. Nothing. It's strange how people who take everything from you still believe they're the ones left empty-handed. I folded the letter and put it in my purse. Then I walked through what used to be the dining room. A small box sat in the corner, the one I'd left for them on purpose. Inside were the family albums, the Christmas ornaments, and the hand-embroidered tablecloth I'd made for Michael's wedding. The memories they hadn't valued, I couldn't bear to take. I left them behind like a time capsule of who we used to be. Outside, the snow had melted into gray slush. The moving truck pulled into the driveway just as I locked the door for the last time. The driver was a young man named Noah, polite and quiet. "You Mrs. Clark?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Got the rest of your boxes loaded in the van. We can take them to the lake cottage now." I nodded, then turned to look at the house one final time. "Goodbye, John," I whispered. "You'd be proud of me." I finally stood up. The drive to the lake took 2 hours. I didn't speak, didn't listen to music, just watched the city shrink behind me. The further we drove, the lighter I felt. The roads grew narrower, the trees taller, and by the time we reached the water, the world felt peaceful again. The cottage was small but perfect. A little porch, 2 rooms, a fireplace, and a view of the frozen lake. When I opened the door, the scent of pine and old wood wrapped around me like a blanket. For the first time in years, I breathed without feeling like I had to apologize for existing. The first few days passed quietly. I unpacked, decorated, hung up John's old photo above the fireplace. I spent my mornings knitting and my afternoons walking along the icy shoreline. At night, I'd make tea and read by the fire, listening to the wind. I thought I'd feel lonely, but I didn't. Peace has a way of keeping you company. Then, on the 5th night, the phone rang. "Mrs. Clark," a deep voice said. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Detective Lewis from the County Sheriff's Department. I'm calling about your son, Michael Clark." My blood went cold. What about him? He and his wife were involved in an altercation at the Maple Street property. Neighbors reported shouting. When officers arrived, the house was vacant, but we found signs of forced entry. Do you know where they might be? "No," I said slowly, gripping the phone. "Why would they break into the house? They don't live there anymore." "That's what we're trying to determine, ma'am. It appears they returned after the sale. The new owners filed a complaint this afternoon." I pressed my hand to my forehead. "Dear Lord." "Ma'am, were there any outstanding disagreements between you and your son regarding the property?" Disagreements. The word made me laugh, a bitter, humorless sound. "Detective, the disagreement wasn't about the house. It was about respect." He paused. "Understood, ma'am. I'll be in touch if we need further information." After I hung up, I sank into the armchair and stared into the fire. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt regret. Instead, I felt a strange calm. I had given them everything, decades of sacrifice, patience, love. And still, they'd wanted more. Maybe now they'd learned that love can't be inherited and respect can't be bought. 2 days later, Michael showed up at my door. He looked older somehow, tired, unshaven, his expensive coat wrinkled and flecked with dirt. Patricia wasn't with him. "Mom," he said, standing in the snow, "can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He brushed off his shoes and looked around the cottage. "So this is where you've been hiding." "Not hiding," I said. "Living." He sighed, sat down at the little table and stared at the steam rising from his breath. "You really did it. You sold the house." "Yes." "Patricia's furious. She says you ruined us." "I didn't ruin anyone, Michael. I simply stopped letting you ruin me." He flinched, then looked up at me. For a moment, he wasn't a grown man anymore. He was that little boy I'd raised, the one who used to fall asleep in my lap after his nightmares. I messed up, didn't I? I didn't answer. I poured him tea instead. The kind with honey and milk, just like when he was small. He took a sip and sighed. "We got into a fight," he said finally. "Patricia and I. She blamed me for everything. She said you played us, that I was stupid to trust you." "And what do you think?" I asked. He looked into his cup. "I think maybe I deserved it. Maybe we all did." The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. His fingers trembled under mine. "Michael," I said softly, "you're my son. No matter what's happened, I'll always love you. But love doesn't mean letting people hurt you. I had to remind you of that, for both our sakes." He nodded slowly. "I know, I don't know how to fix it." "Start by remembering who you were," I said, "before the money, before the pride. Before Patricia taught you that comfort mattered more than kindness." He swallowed hard. "She left," he whispered, packed up the kids and went to her mother's. I felt something stir inside me, not triumph, not revenge, just the quiet ache of inevitability. "Then maybe it's time you start over too." He looked up, eyes red. "Can I stay here for a while?" I hesitated. Then I smiled. "You can stay tonight. After that, we'll see." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle. Outside, the snow began to fall again, slow, steady, forgiving. Later that night, as I watched him asleep on the couch, I whispered into the dark, "Maybe there's still something left to save." But deep down, I knew peace never comes without consequence. Because somewhere, miles away, Patricia was making calls. Angry, desperate calls. And the thing about people like her, they never go down quietly. The morning after Michael showed up, I woke to the sound of the lake wind rattling the windows and the faint smell of burnt toast. For a moment, I thought it was John in the kitchen again. He always burned the first slice, said it was tradition, but when I walked out, it was my son, bleary-eyed, poking at a frying pan with the same confusion he used to have when he was 10 and trying to make breakfast in bed for me on Mother's Day. He looked up sheepishly. "Guess I lost my touch." "You never had it, dear," I said, smiling faintly. "Sit down before you set the cottage on fire." He obeyed, running a hand through his hair. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. Whatever pride he once wore like armor was gone. For the first time in years, I could see my boy again, the one who used to bring me daisies from the yard and promise he'd buy me a big house one day. I just never thought he'd grow up and forget it was my money that made that promise come true. "Did you sleep?" I asked. He nodded. I tried. I kept thinking about the kids, about everything. I poured him coffee and sat across the table. "You always think when it's too late." He winced but didn't argue. "Mom, about Patricia," he began. "I already know," I said. "She left." He hesitated. "She didn't just leave. She filed for divorce." I felt my heart squeeze, not for her, but for the wreckage that always follows pride. "I'm sorry, Michael." He stared into his cup. "She said I'm worthless without her, that she'll make sure I never see the kids again." "She won't succeed," I said. "People like her thrive on control. But they don't understand that control isn't love." He looked up. "You sound just like Dad." I smiled. Then I must be doing something right. We ate in silence after that. The cottage was small, but the air felt cleaner than it had in years. No bitterness, no tension, just the sound of the wind and the fire. But peace is never a long guest in this family. Around noon, a car pulled into the gravel drive. Michael stiffened. Who could that be? The doorbell rang, sharp and impatient. I opened it to find Patricia standing there, her eyes red but her lipstick perfect. She was holding her phone like a weapon. "Josephine," she said coldly, "we need to talk." I stepped aside. "You've come a long way. Come in and warm up before you start shouting." She walked in, dripping fury and perfume, her heels clicking on the old wood floor. Her coat was mink, the kind that makes you forget how many lives had to end to make it shine. "Michael," she snapped, "why haven't you answered your phone? Do you know what you've done to us?" He stood, jaw clenched. "Us? There's no us anymore, Patricia. You made sure of that." She scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. I'm here to fix this before it gets worse." "Worse?" I repeated. "You mean after you humiliated me in my own home and encouraged my grandchildren to mock me? Or worse than forging my name on the refinance papers 3 years ago?" That got her attention. Her face paled. "What are you talking about?" "I had the documents reviewed," I said evenly. "You and Michael took out a second mortgage on that house without telling me. My signature was forged." Michael's head snapped toward her. "What?" Patricia's voice faltered. "That's ridiculous. Why would I imagined to fund your online lifestyle brand," I interrupted. "The one that somehow lost $50,000 in 6 months. You might be able to fool your followers, but not me. I worked in finance long before you were born, dear." Michael looked like he'd been punched. You forged Mom's name?" She turned on him, her mask cracking. "Don't start pretending you're innocent. You were fine spending the money while it lasted." He took a step back. "I didn't know. Patricia, tell me you didn't do this." Her eyes darted between us, calculating. Then she laughed, a high, brittle sound. "Oh, please, none of this matters. You think the bank will care about your mother's bruised ego? The sale went through. The money's gone." I folded my arms. "Not quite." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "The sale proceeds were placed in a trust," I said. "Every cent of it is protected. You won't touch a dollar." Patricia's face hardened. "You wouldn't dare." "I already did," I said. "And since you committed fraud, I've sent the documentation to my lawyer. The sheriff's department will handle the rest." Her lipstick trembled as her jaw tightened. "You old witch," she hissed. "Careful," I said softly. "The walls here are thin, and you're already skating on ice." She turned toward Michael, desperate now. You can't let her do this. She's destroying our family. Michael's voice broke. You destroyed it yourself. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then Patricia grabbed her purse, her fury shaking the air. You'll regret this, she spat at me. Both of you. She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence that followed was almost holy. Michael sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. I can't believe this, he muttered. I can, I said. I've seen what greed does. It blinds people until they can't tell right from wrong. He looked up, his eyes wet. What happens now? Now, I said, taking his hand. Now we begin again, slowly, honestly, the way we should have years ago. But life doesn't let you rebuild without tests. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Thick envelope, official seal. I recognized the handwriting. Patricia's lawyer. I opened it while Michael watched. It was a custody petition. Patricia was suing for full custody of Emma and Tyler, citing Michael's mental instability and influence from an emotionally manipulative parent. That last part made me laugh out loud. She's calling me manipulative? I said. Michael's face turned white. She's trying to take the kids. I folded the paper neatly and looked at him. Then we'll fight. Not with anger, not with shouting. We'll fight the only way that lasts. With truth. He frowned. What do you mean? I smiled sadly. Your children deserve to know who their mother really is. And lucky for us, I have proof. What proof? I opened the drawer of my writing desk and pulled out a small hard drive. Everything. Emails, bank records, her fake business accounts, her forged documents. I kept them all. When she mocked me for being old, she forgot that old people are observant. We notice everything. Michael stared at me in disbelief. You kept all this? I keep everything, I said quietly, because I learned long ago, people only respect what they can't erase. He reached across the table and took the drive from my hand. Mom, I don't deserve you. I smiled faintly. Maybe not, but you're still my son, and it's time we remind that woman who she's dealing with. That night, after he went to bed, I sat by the window and watched the moonlight spill across the frozen lake. Somewhere out there, Patricia was plotting her next move, but I'd lived long enough to know something she didn't. Evil burns itself out, and when it does, all that's left are ashes. Only this time, I wouldn't be the one cleaning them up. The day of the custody hearing was colder than any I could remember. The lake outside my window had turned to glass, the kind that hides darkness beneath its surface. I watched the sky change from gray to pale blue while Michael paced behind me, rehearsing lines under his breath. He was terrified, not just of losing his children, but of facing the woman who'd turned our home into a battlefield. Mom, he said, voice trembling, what if the judge believes her? I turned to him slowly. Then we make him see what's real. He looked so much like his father that morning, anxious but determined, the kind of man who'd face a storm just to shield his family. It gave me a strange kind of peace. The courthouse was a cold beige building that smelled like dust and old paper. Patricia was already there when we arrived. Her hair was perfectly styled, her coat immaculate, and her eyes bright with calculated tears. Beside her sat a man in a navy suit, her lawyer. All charm and venom. When she saw us, she tilted her chin slightly. It was the same look she used to give me at family dinners when she thought she'd won something. I smiled back. I'd seen that expression before, on people who didn't yet realize they were standing on thin ice. The hearing began at 10 sharp. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and clear eyes, listened patiently as Patricia's lawyer painted me as a manipulative matriarch with a history of emotional control. I almost laughed out loud when he called me a destabilizing influence. Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a tissue at all the right moments. I only want what's best for the children, she said, her voice trembling with false sincerity. They've suffered enough confusion. Josephine constantly undermines me. She fills their heads with stories, with resentment. They're just kids. I looked down at my folded hands, steady as stone. Let her spin her web. I'd spent a lifetime letting people talk first. Then it was our turn. Michael's lawyer, a quiet man named Harris, stood and called his first witness, me. As I walked to the stand, Patricia's lips curled into a small, smug smile. I imagined she thought I'd crumble, that the frail old woman she'd mocked would falter under oath. But I didn't. I had spent months learning what silence could do. Now I was ready to let my words work harder. "Mrs. Clark," Harris began gently, "can you tell the court what role you've had in your grandchildren's lives?" I nodded. "I raised them," I said simply. "Their parents were busy building a life, so I built a childhood for the kids instead." "And when did your relationship with their mother begin to change?" "The day she realized love doesn't fit on her social media page," I replied. A quiet laugh rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge's mouth twitched. Patricia's lawyer objected, but the judge waved him off. "Proceed." I continued, calm and deliberate. I told them about the months of disrespect, about the laughter when I fell, about how Patricia encouraged it. I spoke of the forged documents, the hidden loans, the nights I lay awake wondering how my family became strangers. Then Harris plugged the small hard drive into the projector. "Your Honor," he said, "these are bank statements, emails, and business records, each verified by Mrs. Clark's attorney. They show that Patricia Clark, diverted family funds and forged signatures to conceal personal debts." The color drained from Patricia's face. "That's a lie," she shouted. "She's framing me." "Objection," her lawyer sputtered. "Overruled," said the judge. Harris clicked again, and Patricia's own emails appeared on the screen. I could feel the air leave the room. Words glowed in black and white. "Don't tell Michael. His mother will cover it anyway." Patricia's hands shook. "Those were taken out of context." "Of course," I said quietly. "Everything looks worse in the light." The judge looked at her sternly. "Mrs. Clark, did you or did you not sign financial documents under your mother-in-law's name?" Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. "I don't recall." "That's fine," the judge said. "We'll let the forensic analyst recall it for you." Harris nodded. "We have a handwriting expert who confirms the forgery." The courtroom fell silent. Patricia's composure cracked like thin glass. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just sat there, still, remembering every quiet humiliation I'd endured. The moment she'd filmed me crying in the kitchen, the day she told me grief was bad energy, the way my grandchildren had learned cruelty from her smirking approval. Now the truth was here, and it was louder than all her laughter. When the hearing ended, the judge spoke directly to Patricia. "Mrs. Clark, this court will not grant custody to a parent who falsifies financial records and emotionally manipulates her family. Custody will remain with Mr. Clark until further review." Patricia's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, but she was frozen, her tears finally real. Michael exhaled shakily beside me. "Mom," he whispered, "we did it." I shook my head. "No, son, we didn't win. We just stopped losing." As we left the courthouse, the sky had begun to snow, slow, soft flakes that clung to my coat. Michael put his arm around me. "You saved us," he said quietly. I looked up at him, my heart full but heavy. "No," I said. "You saved yourself. I just gave you the chance." The days that followed were quieter, steadier. Michael started working again, a small repair business near town. He visited every weekend with Emma and Tyler. The kids were wary at first, guilt making them awkward, but it melted over hot cocoa and laughter. One night, Emma hugged me suddenly. "Grandma, I'm sorry," she whispered. I kissed her hair. "You're young. Life teaches kindness slower than cruelty, but you'll learn." And for a while, I thought maybe that was the end of it. Until one evening, a letter arrived in a plain white envelope. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. Patricia standing by a sleek black car in a city street I didn't recognize, sunglasses on, a smile that could curdle milk. On the back, in her handwriting, "You think it's over, old woman? I'm just getting started." I stared at it for a long moment, feeling the cold crawl up my spine. I slipped it into the drawer under John's photograph. "Let her come," I whispered. "This time, I'm ready." I didn't sleep that night. The wind off the lake howled like something ancient, rattling the windows as if it wanted in. I sat by the fireplace, Patricia's letter in my lap, the flames reflecting in the photo of her perfect little smile, the smile of someone who still thought she held the upper hand. But she didn't understand me. Not really. She thought revenge meant screaming matches and courtroom battles. She didn't realize it was patience that wins wars. And I had patience carved into my bones. For weeks, nothing happened. The snow thawed. The lake turned from glass to water again, black and calm. Michael rebuilt slowly, spending evenings fixing old tools and helping the kids with homework at my kitchen table. Sometimes he'd stop mid-sentence like he couldn't quite believe we had peace again. "Mom," he said one night, "it feels weird. After everything, just normal." I smiled. Normal is underrated. You don't know how precious it is until someone steals it from you. But peace never lasts forever. It started with the calls, unknown numbers, heavy silence on the other end. Once, a woman's breath, soft, mocking. Patricia's perfume of control, even through static. I didn't tell Michael. He'd been through enough. Then one morning, a man in a dark suit came to the cottage. He introduced himself as a private investigator from Denver. "Mrs. Clark," he said, "I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Patricia Clark. She's filed a motion to contest the sale of your former home." I laughed, not kindly. That house was sold legally months ago. "Yes, ma'am," he said, flipping open his notebook. "But she's alleging coercion and mental incompetence on your part at the time of the sale." "Coercion?" I repeated. "By whom? Myself?" He hesitated. "She claims you were not of sound mind when you signed the papers." For a second, I couldn't speak. Then I smiled, slow and sharp. "Tell her I've been of sound mind for 73 years, and I'll prove it." When he left, I sat for a long time staring at the frozen horizon. Patricia was clever. I'd give her that. She couldn't win with lies, so she tried madness. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Mr. O'Neill. "She's stirring the pot again," I said. He sighed. "I thought she might." "Don't worry, Josephine, I've already filed an injunction. She won't touch a dime." But I wasn't worried about the money anymore. It wasn't about the house. It was about legacy, about truth. I was tired of letting other people write my story. It was time I wrote my own ending. So I called Channel 7 News. The reporter, a young woman named Leah, drove out that weekend. She had soft eyes and a notebook full of curiosity. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "I heard about your family case. People are calling you the woman who sold her house out from under her ungrateful children." I chuckled. "Is that what they're saying?" She smiled cautiously. "It's quite a story, a moral one." "Moral," I repeated. "That's a word we don't use enough." She asked if I'd tell her everything. So I did. Every laugh that cut too deep, every betrayal, every quiet decision that turned pain into purpose. She listened, sometimes wide-eyed, sometimes teary. When I finished, she said softly, "You don't sound bitter." "I'm not," I said. "I just finally learned the difference between love and obligation." The story aired 2 weeks later under the title, "The Grandmother Who Took Back Her Life." It spread faster than I expected. My phone filled with messages from strangers, widows, parents, even young people who said, "I wish I had your courage." But courage is a strange thing. You don't notice it growing until someone else calls it that. To me, it was just survival. Michael saw the segment too. He came over that evening holding a newspaper like it was holy scripture. "Mom," he said, eyes shining, "they love you. The stories everywhere." I laughed softly. I'm not sure love's the right word. Maybe understanding. The kids arrived behind him, running in with the wild energy of forgiveness. Emma hugged me first, Tyler next. "Grandma," Emma said shyly, "everyone at school saw your story. They said you're a legend." "A legend?" I smiled. "I'm just an old lady who got tired of being quiet." And for a while, we were happy again. Dinner by the fire, laughter returning like a familiar song. Even Michael started smiling again, until the phone rang one last time. I recognized the voice instantly. "Enjoying your fame, old woman." Patricia's voice, cold as ever, coiled through the receiver. "Quite," I said calmly. "How's the lawsuit going?" She laughed, but it was hollow. "You think you've won? You ruined me. You turned me into a joke." "You did that yourself, dear. I just turned the lights on." "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Everyone does eventually." "I already did," I said. "For years, not anymore." She hung up, and that was the last time I ever heard her voice. 2 months later, the news ran another story. This time about Patricia Clark's arrest for fraud and tax evasion. Apparently, her business empire was built on forged invoices and unpaid investors. I read the article over breakfast, the sunlight catching the steam of my tea. I felt no joy, no vindication, just closure. That afternoon, I walked down to the lake. The ice had melted completely now, and the water rippled in the breeze. I sat on the old bench John built decades ago, the one that had been waiting for me all along. I thought about everything that had happened, about the laughter, the pain, the small humiliations that once felt unbearable. And I realized something I hadn't before. Revenge wasn't what freed me. Truth did. When you spend your whole life giving, it takes courage to take your life back. People call it selfishness, but sometimes it's salvation. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of pine and water. Somewhere behind me, I could hear Michael calling to the kids, their voices carrying over the wind. Laughter again, this time honest, real. "See, John?" I whispered. "They're learning." The sun began to dip below the trees, setting the lake on fire with gold. I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me, not from the sun, but from something deeper. Peace. They'd laughed when I fell once, but in the end they stood because I taught them how. And that, I thought, was the only kind of victory worth keeping.